1536 is a long time ago, going on 500 years now. And William Tyndale was executed that year. Brussels, he was strapped to a post in the public square, executed, and then his body was immolated. His crime was having the audacity to believe that the common person, what he called the plowboy, that is the farmer, or the farmer's hand, should have the same privilege as the most educated man or woman in England at the time. They should be able to read God's word in their own language. Shouldn't have to learn Greek or Latin, shouldn't have to learn Hebrew. And he set about, over the last 15 years of his life, of producing the first English translation of the Bible. For that, they killed him. Ironically, the king who put out the warrant for him wasn't the one who executed him, was King Henry VIII. Yeah, that King Henry VIII. And Tyndale, as he was dying just before his final breath, prayed this public prayer. Lord, open the King of England's eyes. God answered Tyndale's prayer. Within, are you ready for this? 1 year of Tyndale's execution, the very same King Henry VIII authorized the first English translation of the Bible. And William Tyndale's goal, his dream, the thing to which he had dedicated the last 15 years of his life, wildly surpassed his dreams. The Tyndale Bible would later become the basis for a little Bible called the King James Bible, the most published Bible in the history of books. For nearly 500 years, God honored the crazy vision, the purpose of William Tyndale. Question for you, what is your purpose? Now, I'm not talking about something as grand as translating a Bible that will sell millions and millions and millions and millions of copies for 500 years. That's crazy talk. Of course, Tyndale probably thought that too at the time he was being executed in the public square. But what is the difference you're going to make? And I'm not talking about in theory out there. I mean right now in the season in which you find yourself, with your family, your job. What is your purpose? What is that thing behind the thing that's going to make a difference years from now? What about with your health? Not random that you are facing whatever you're facing. What is it that God's going to accomplish in your life through your faithfulness in this current season of health? What about your education? You're not just being educated to consume that and become a fathead with knowledge. You're being educated to add value to the world around you. What's that going to be like? How are you going to do that? What's the purpose that you are going to be serving? How about your finances? In my prayer, I mentioned how over the years people have benefited from those who've given 20, 22, 23 years ago in the life of this church. We're sitting in the results of their generosity. The season you're in right now, what's the greater purpose you're serving? Your faith. So encouraged this week by we're in a series called Rooted. So many of you are in small groups with Rooted. Let me just read you a quote from the reading from our first day. You'll be reading it coming up this week. Jesus didn't end his mission at the cross. He was resurrected into a new kind of life. Some people stop their Christian journey at forgiveness. But in order to join Jesus in the resurrection life, we need to let ourselves experience the death of our old lives and resurrection into a new life. A fresh purpose that will have a lasting impact on our own lives, those closest to us, and the world in which we move. We were made new. We were, as one translation puts it, made into a masterpiece of God's creation. We are designed to do good works. We don't do good works to secure our salvation. Rather, we do them because of our salvation. It's a good thing to remember. God redeemed us, and it's out of our love for Him that we can help bring people closer to the Lord. Here's the takeaway of that quote. We are invited to be God's agents of reconciliation, mercy, truth, wisdom, and hope. What is your purpose? Where you're at now, how will God use your action, reaction, attitude, interaction? How will He use that to further His glory? How will He use that for your good and the good of those around you? Take a look at Philippians chapter 1. Philippians chapter 1, the New Testament book, one of 6 that the writer, the Apostle Paul, wrote from prison, in this case in Rome, under bondage from Nero. He will mention 3 times in one paragraph, quote, my imprisonment, unquote. He was very much aware of the limitations of his current setting. And yet, because of the clarity of the calling God had placed on his life, because he understood so clearly his purpose while in prison, he wrote letters that we read today and gain value from. The question we're asking today, where you're at now, the circumstances in which you find yourself currently, what is your purpose? How will God use that to bring glory to Himself and good to you and those that you love? Let me say this. Understanding your purpose clarifies, inspires, and sustains. Let's read the text. I'm going to begin in verse 12 of Philippians chapter 1. And then I want to talk a little bit about that thesis statement I just laid out, because I think it might scratch an itch for some of us here today. Philippians chapter 1, verse 12, written from a Roman prison because of Paul's commitment to share the gospel with those different from himself. I want you to know, brothers and sisters, it's always important to me when someone in God's Word says, hey, I want you to know something. It's going to be valuable information. I want you to know that what has happened to me has really served to advance the gospel. Let's pause for a minute and think about that statement. Bless you. What has happened to me has served to advance the good news. That's what gospel means. I said a moment ago that understanding your purpose clarifies, inspires, and sustains. What I mean by that is if you find yourself in a time of confusion, going back to first principles, to purpose, will clarify that confusion. If you find yourself listless in life, not a lot of energy, why do I do all this? Motivation low. Going back to purpose, why you're where you are, will help motivate and drive energy. It will inspire, and understanding your purpose clarifies, inspires, and sustains. So that inevitably all of us will face seasons of discouragement. I'm not making any progress at all. And understanding what it is God's doing and how you and I can respond to what He's doing, that can help motivate us. That can help sustain our energy during that time. Let's read a little more. He said, so what's happened to me, by the way, what happened to him? Let me give you his last 5 years from the time when he wrote this. He'd gone to Jerusalem with several folks on this mission of mercy. He was taking money to be able to buy food for starving Jewish folks. He's trying to build a gospel bridge to them. And for that, he was arrested and beaten and tried and attempted, the governor wanted to bribe him, say, if you'll give me something, I'll let you go. And Paul, out of integrity, said, no, I'm not going to do that. But he did tell him about Jesus at that hearing. And then there was an attempt made on his life, and he was taken 200 miles north and thrown in jail for another 2 years. And finally, he appealed to Emperor Nero and said, hey, I want to go tell my case to the highest authority. And they granted him that appeal, and he got on board a ship and was headed to Rome when a storm hit, and he was shipwrecked. And spent a night and a day in the water, hanging on to something, a wooden cask or something, and he came ashore like a draggled, drowned dog and spent the winter there in house arrest in Crete, or in Malta rather, and he arrived in Rome, not like he thought, not like he hoped, but he arrived in Rome, a prisoner, having to pay for his own prison expenses. And that's the last 5 years. I want you to know that's what happened to me, what has happened to me has really served to advance the gospel. And here it is, verse 13. So that, here's the reason, it has become known throughout the whole imperial guard and to all the rest that, here's the first use of the term, my imprisonment is for Christ. And if you're a follower of Jesus Christ, your circumstances currently are for Christ. And most of the brothers, that would be other believers in Rome, most of the brothers have become confident in the Lord by my imprisonment. There's the second use. They're much more bold to speak the word without fear. By the way, every use of the word my imprisonment, or the words my imprisonment, will be connected to a reason why his imprisonment advanced the gospel. Paul is thinking so clearly about his purpose that he could find multiple, 3 here in this text, reasons how God was going to use his circumstances to further his purpose. Some indeed, verse 15, maybe I'm the only one. Sometimes you feel like, man, people are just not being fair to me. Am I the only one? Am I the only one? People are not fair. Am I the only one? Anybody else? Or people question motives. Am I the only one? They just know why you're doing what you're doing. Now, they don't know anything about you or your personal circumstances at the moment, but they're sure this is why you're wrong. Listen to what Paul wrote. I love this paragraph. Talk about a big heart. Talk about the purity and the clarity of purpose. Some indeed preach Christ from envy and rivalry. Like Paul's clear mission was, I'm just going to get the good news out to everybody who'll listen, some that won't listen. He said, some people now that I'm in prison are like, finally, that guy's out of the way and it's my time to shine. They're preaching the truth. They're preaching Christ, but they're doing it motivated by envy. I'll show you, Paul, I can do it better than you can. Rivalry. I'm glad you're in jail. Now it's my turn. And that'd be so hard. When your life feels a shambles or a mess, people are critical and they're using that as an opportunity to sort of shine and brag their own way. That's so hard. And I am just forever grateful for this next sentence, because Paul gives us permission to grieve that and then get on down the road to something better. The latter, that is, those who preach from goodwill, do it out of love. Their motivation to preach the gospel because they have been loved by God and therefore they love others. Knowing that I'm put here for the defense of the gospel. The former proclaim Christ out of selfish ambition. Wait, what? Preachers, sometimes big-time preachers, might be motivated by polishing their own apple, burnishing their own image, building their own kingdom? Never. Well, it happened in the New Testament time too, and not sincerely, but thinking to afflict me, here it is, in my imprisonment. They think that they're preaching and convinced they're doing it better than he was. They think that that's going to afflict me. The idea of pain, a pang. They're going to pang my heart during this time. Now here's the bigness of being clear about mission. What then? Here he's connecting his imprisonment with purpose. So what is another translation? Only that in every way, whether in pretense or in truth, here it is, I have this underlined, Christ is proclaimed, and in that I rejoice. I don't know I could do it. I just don't know. In my hurt and my loss and my frustration, my disappointment, my being convinced that right now I'm on the sidelines in life, life's not turning out the way I wanted, in that setting, I can rejoice that others are advancing? That may be a bigger heart than I have. The reason why he could do it was he was so convinced, even in prison, his mission was being advanced. And he was okay with that. He said, what has happened to me has turned out to advance the gospel. How can that be? He was able to renew friendships with the Philippians. That's how. This letter, the letter we write, by the way, 16 times in the letter, the word joy or rejoice is used. It's the happiest letter in the New Testament, written from prison. He wouldn't have done that if he hadn't have been arrested. Interestingly enough, this is also a thank you letter for money that they had sent to support him in prison. He renewed his friendship with the Philippians. He modeled his faith for those closest to him. He said, you recognize that the jailers that are keeping me in prison, they recognize that I'm here for the gospel, and I just tell them about it all the time. Can you imagine an 8-hour shift next to Paul? Hey, did you guys hear about Jesus? Yeah, Paul, you said yes. Yeah, but I mean, did you hear this about you? Hey, you know the guy who walked on water? Yeah, Paul, you told us that last week. Yeah, but you understand. Who do you think really was in jail there? I think God was. It's interesting that later we realize Herod's household, the king's household, the Caesar's household, there were a bunch of Christians there. Yeah, that was his chief of the guard and all the guards there. And he modeled his faith to those closest to him. He encouraged other Christians, not only through the letters he wrote, but those who visited him. They came to see him in prison thinking, oh, poor little old Paul. They walked out like, this guy's a rock. I feel great about my faith. He was able to witness to Caesar Nero at trial. Look at the next paragraph. Verse 18, the second part. Yes, and there's a repetition of this word rejoice. Yes, and I will rejoice. So he's looking at his current circumstances and saying, I can thank God for this and this and this and that. And now he's looking forward. How about that? Future focused even when he's in the prison. And I will rejoice, for I know. Remember he started verse 12 by saying, I know. Here he begins verse 18, verse 19 saying, I know that through your prayers, because prayer changes things. Through your prayers and the help of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, this will turn out for my deliverance. That's a lot of faith. I know God is using my current circumstances for His purpose. And I know whatever the future holds, it will turn out for my salvation or my deliverance. Verse 20, it is my eager expectation and hope. What? In prison awaiting trial, and you eagerly expect and you live with hope? That I will not at all be ashamed. I would say it's my eager expectation and hope that I get out of this dungeon. Paul said, no, I got a deeper purpose than my comfort of getting out of prison. It is my hope and my eager expectation that I will not at all be ashamed, but that with full courage now, as always, Christ will be honored in my body, whether by life or death. Verse 21, here's that great verse, for to me to live is Christ and to die is gain. He's saying, hey, when I stand before Nero, it's going to be intimidating, that royal court and all the soldiers and the glory of Rome. And I just want to be a little Jewish guy who walks in there and tells Nero about Jesus. That's all I want to be. I just want to be courageous. I want to do it with hope. In fact, I am expecting that out of my current circumstances, I'll have an opportunity to tell others about the hope that I have. It's an amazing thing. So let's talk about where you're at. Let's talk about hope. 3 questions to help you live on purpose. It's probably a recurring theme in my preaching if you've been here for a long time. Say, yep, Scott's talking about purpose again. Well, it's been so clarifying in my own life, sustaining in my own life. Let's ask some questions about our current circumstances. 3 questions to help you live on purpose. How can you display Christ? And one of the things I said that Paul did was he put Christ on display for those closest to him. And he certainly wrote letters to the Philippians and some of the other churches, Colossae, and But mostly he was concerned about those who were right in front of him. So let's focus there for a minute. If you're single, this is your family or your closest friends, maybe coworkers or co-students with you. Have you thought about, in your current circumstances, how you can choose to display Christ? What does that look like? See, when purpose is clear, I can put on display the goodness and the glory of Christ in any circumstance. All of a sudden, my choices become simpler. Those nearest, if you're married, it's your spouse. If you're a parent, it's your children, brothers or sisters. Go outside the family, it's co-workers. Those in your fairly immediate sphere of influence, how are you displaying Christ in your current circumstances? I'm not talking about sandwich board. Paul did it by demonstrating joy and hope and eager expectation in a place where mostly people were discouraged and depressed. Prison. Paul did it by having the opportunity to speak up when he could. By the way, you notice he twice prayed for courage. It's hard to tell people about Jesus when life is off a cliff. But they may never be more open to hearing from you than then. How can you display Christ? Family, school, job, success, failure, trials, uncertainty, decision-making, finances, church life. And when you come out the other side, you should be a rabid advocate for the faithfulness of God in your darkest times. You should be motivated not to hold back, but to lean in and encourage others. You will discover, as I have, that one of the greatest energizers of your life is open-handedly giving more of yourself than you ever thought you could. And finding wells of supernatural strength you didn't think you have because you don't have them. Remember what Paul prayed for? The power of the Spirit of Jesus Christ. That like gas on a fire will light up your mission and purpose in this life. 3 questions to help you live on purpose. Number 1, how can you display Christ? You know, I think that in recent weeks, Pastor Tay Mitchell and his wife Samantha have gotten tough news about the advance of the cancer in Sam's life, and they have big decisions to make about treatment paths going forward. Vic and I were over there a couple weeks ago and just said, hey, you know, it may be that in this season, God may simply be calling you to model how believers endure suffering with faith and hope. I honestly, being close to that situation, sometimes don't know how they do it because they model that beautifully. Beautifully. Putting Christ on display. Second question. How can you encourage other Christians? Paul's concern was, I want to display Christ in my life, my attitude, my words, the way I treat others. His second concern was, how is it I can encourage those nearest to me? Many of the brothers, he said, many of the brothers and sisters have been encouraged, I love that word, to share their faith more boldly. So that your constancy in times of suffering or loss or hurt or confusion, what might really do is serve to encourage others who are going through the same thing. How can you encourage other Christians? How can you, and it requires the courage, it requires the discipline to look up a little higher. Maybe beyond the real pain and discouragement or despair that you feel, and look down the road and say, you know, is there somebody else that I can help even out of my own hurt, frustration, confusion? I focus on that because when we're successful, we want to tell everybody about it. Everybody around us knows when we had a PR at our CrossFit. It's harder when the bottom drops out. And yet when you find that God sustains, you'll be a powerful testimony to those around you. Look to intentionally encourage those around you. Say, Scott, honestly, I got nothing for them. Stop and think, what's your purpose? You're displaying Christ. How are you displaying Christ in a way that encourages those around you? It's being near and saying nothing. It's picking up a pen and paper and writing the note. It's the gift given. Do that. Be intentional this week. Take action, not passivity. Encourage one other person. Make that a goal this week. And you tell me, you find me and tell me if that didn't pick up not only your spirits, but them as well. Three questions to help you live on purpose. How can you display Christ? How can you encourage other Christians? 3, how can you see beyond your immediate circumstances? Paul said, I will continue to rejoice because I know what I am experiencing right now will turn out for my deliverance, my salvation. That's the word. So somehow, with the eyes of faith, he looked not only beyond his own circumstances to how to encourage others, he looked even further and said, I know God's going to use this to advance the gospel mission. You and I this morning, reading from this text, are fulfillment of that conviction. This is, I think, especially important when circumstances are beyond our control. Like, I can't change it. The diagnosis is not going to change. There's no path forward financially for me right now. I can't change jobs. I can't afford to change jobs. Then can you look and see beyond to how God might use this for your deliverance? How you're going to be a better man or a better woman, a closer follower of Jesus Christ because you're enduring this right now? Last night, we gathered here. It was, a couple hundred folks. It was Alula's Dream Foundation. This is the second year in a row we've hosted this event. But by the way, we as a congregation, we don't do fundraisers, but we open our building to multiple organizations, good causes, Christian causes, that may use that for fundraisers. If you say, well, I thought we didn't do fundraisers. Well, we don't, but we certainly want to partner with other organizations. And Tesfaye Abe is a friend. He's been a business partner of this church for years and years and years. And if the place looks clean, it's because his company has done it. And his son died 5 years ago last week. Student at UIC, tragic drowning in Lake Michigan. Broken, just broken. And out of that, Tesfaye has established Alula, his son, the Alula's Dream Foundation, a building community center at the Tigray region of Ethiopia, where they're from. Alula's heart was for the people he came from, and civil wars and killings and kidnappings, and in the midst of all that chaos, up goes a building that's a safe place. Somehow, Tesfaye has been able to take that hurt and loss, tragedy, and he's seen beyond, and in Alula's name is making a difference, as I said last night in my opening comments, that will outlive everybody in this room. Can you do that? Can you see how God will use this for your own deliverance? We're going to close the service with a song. It's one of my favorite hymns. It's called In Christ Alone. It's the song that just tells the story of the gospel. I didn't know too much about the origin of the song. This was kind of fun that Keith Getty, who wrote the music, wrote the music on the back of an electric bill. I just love that so much. He was 25, so if I remember when I was 25, he's trying to figure out how to pay that electric bill. And so Stuart Townsend, who wrote the lyrics, said, really wanted to write a song that encapsulated and captured the gospel. In fact, they wrote this. I struggle to understand and fully embrace my faith in the midst of an unbelieving, multi-religious culture. Getty grew up in Durham, England, and was ready to throw away that faith. But it was a journey to believe in the uniqueness of Christ, the scriptures, and the gospel story. Just wrestling with purpose in life. The truth, is it true, and will it sustain me in life? By the time I came through this struggle, my faith was stronger. And I wanted to write songs for the church that brought the full, rich, life-giving story of the gospel into believers' hearts and minds. So I told Townsend, who wrote the lyrics, let's do a song that tells the whole gospel story in one song. Townsend wrote the lyrics, and he says this: the hymn places our hope, our assurance, our eternal destiny in the right place, on the solid foundation of Christ. Townsend said he needed reminding continually not to live by his feelings or circumstances, but by the unchanging truth of the gospel. You and I need that regularly too. So let's stand. Let me pray over you. And then as our statement of faith, that God will bring my deliverance out of this, let's sing with conviction a song that tells the story of the gospel. Father, thank you for your word, for the clarity it brings for our current circumstance. I pray, Lord, that you would help us to believe and live the truth of the gospel. Jesus Christ, born, lived, crucified, dead and buried, and risen again. Lord, when we believe that, you make us a part of your family. You clear our vision. You call us to serve others. You promise never to leave us. May we never drift far from those truths. Make it so, Lord, I pray, even as we sing this song, is an act of worship to you. We ask this in Jesus' name. All God's people said,